Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a hard melodic techno full track. There's a bunch of new things that I've learned recently that I'm going to be showing you in this video. That's why I made this one. Before this video starts, I want to remind you to go join my Discord. The link is right at the top of the description. This is the best community for electronic music on the internet right now, so don't miss out. You can also grab this full track template, the project file, samples, MIDI, presets, the entire arrangement. All of that is available at the top of the description as well on my website. Definitely go grab that. It really helps support me. Plus, this is, in my opinion, the best template on the market for this style of techno. So if you want to grab that and you want to make your best possible music, you know what you got to do. Go grab it. It's at the top of the description. Once again, thank you so much for the support, guys. It really helps keep me going. And let's dive in. So we're going to start up here with the kick. Now, this kick is a little bit different. It's using a technique I've briefly spoken about before, but I'm going to elaborate on it more here. So what we've got here is we have a kick. 2 layers, right? You can see we have a low kick. The EQ3 is just taking the lows. And then a mid and high kick with just the mids and highs. But then we also have this bass. And it's a rumble, but you can see there's no reverb or delay or even really distortion happening here. So the way that this bass is being made is it's actually this new technique where, and you can really only do this in Ableton, where you take a kick, it's this hard techno kick, and then you warp it. And what you do is you see how this is like gray down here? This is like the stretching, so this one makes it go like twice as fast. This one makes it twice as slow. So you just stretch that out all the way. Just literally just press it until you can't press it anymore. And then it creates like this. Right? Obviously you can hear it sounds kind of crazy. You know, it's almost like metallic, but it's got that like pulled out bass. And it creates a really interesting bass sound, right? Because there's no other way to really create a bass sound like this. Like, you could try to synthesize that with a synthesizer all day. You could probably make something sort of similar in FM. But it's like, dude, like, you know, it's just like simple sound design stuff, right? But it works really well. And it also punches through the track really nicely. Now, the other thing with this one, though, is you're going to want to make sure you tune it. Like, I listened to these and just slowly pitched this around until it worked. So then we just have a low pass filter on that to get rid of the metallic stuff. I have a drum bus, which kind of fattens it up a little bit. Also adds a little bit of boom. It's tuned to F, which is the key we're in. I got this EQ8 cutting out the low lows, like below 30 hertz, which you can't really hear. And then I just have this compressor side chaining it to the kick. And then this utility converting it to mono at the end. Even though this isn't like got any stereo effects on it, sometimes there can be a little bit of weird stereo stuff going on with these, so you want to just cut that. On the group, we have actually just a bit of EQ, so again, just cutting those low frequencies that you can't hear that would get in the way of the headroom in the track. And then we also have a high pass filter, and this is just in the intro and outro. Right, just to kind of bring that in. Cool. So the next thing we have here is this respace. So for the MIDI on this one, it's a pretty simple pattern in F minor actually, but it's very effective. It's just 3 chords. It's F minor, and these aren't playing root notes, but I'll tell you the chords. So F minor, C sharp major, and then A sharp minor. So we got our root note, our 6th, and then our 4th. And then this is just an octave up of the 4th. So yeah, it's a pretty simple progression, but it's just very powerful. Like when you go from that root note up to the 6th, and then down to the 4th. It works really nicely while still being simple. Now, for the sound on this one, it's made with Wavetable. It's 2 layers in this instrument rack, which is a very effective way of doing this because you can see what I've done here is there's a lot of filter automation throughout this. Like, that's another thing about this type of track is that you need to keep this automation moving. Like, you can see it never really sits in the same place twice. It's never just like static. It's always dynamic and moving, even if it's slow moving. And with this instrument rack, you can really easily do that, because all you got to do is just, you have your 2 layers, and then you can just map them, to this one macro, and then you just automate that. So yeah, so these are actually pretty similar. It's a saw wave, 2 saw waves with a bunch of unison, and then the filter being open and closed. And then this one is also 2 saw waves. You can't see the second one for some reason. And that has no unison. So it's like, you combine the unison one and the non-unison one, and you get a really full, fat sound. Then we got a little bit of drum bus. Here's without it. And with it. So you can see it's not doing too much. It's not like we're trying to go from day to night here. We're trying to just go to like dawn, if you feel me. Like, we're just trying to have like a little bit more fatness added without taking away from it. Almost like a layer. Then we have this high pass filter, which has a bit of automation in the break, just to kind of like bring this in there. We got a utility with the bass mono. Even though we're not actually getting any low end out of this, because the low end's coming from that rumble, this is really just like a tonal bass, if that makes any sense. We still want to convert those lower frequencies to mono, so you don't have any weird stuff clashing with your actual bass. I have this EQ, which comes on every time the kick is playing, because it kind of makes it like fit a little bit better with that. But then in the break, we want to just let it shine. So we got that, and then finally just this auto pan, which is just making it sound like it's sidechained to the kick, and then that turns off in the break. Then we have the lead. So this is, I think, a really nice lead actually, and it's kind of like this call and response thing. Now, there's a lot of levels of call and response. The biggest one that you can probably notice is this first bar, this call, and then the second bar response. Right, so that's one layer of call and response happening there, and it creates this nice kind of like melancholic feel with the melody. But there's also this one, the dun 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 dun, right? Dun dun dun. That's like the pattern that these are all doing, and the dun dun dun, that's the call, and then the dun dun dun, that's the response. So that's also a call and response. So if you can have multiple different call and responses happening, it's good. And there's even kind of on a bigger level, this one where you have this first 2 bars ends like this. Right? It has like the, and then the response would be this. So yeah, it's a lot of call and response going on. But that's like, I want to show you, it's not just, you know, understanding the notes and the scale and stuff. Like musically, you know, we got our root note, 5th, 6th, 4th, all that kind of stuff. You know, we can talk about that all day. But there's more to it than that. I think if you only know that, that's where you can kind of like not really have a lot of emotion in your music. You got to put a lot of other stuff in there too. Now, for the sound on this one, it's kind of similar to that last thing where it's 2 saw waves. We can see this one is a saw wave and a square wave actually, with a bit of an LFO on the pulse width, and then a bunch of unison, and then this one is just a saw wave by itself. And these have some filter automation as well. I actually just copied it over. I didn't do the macro thing with this one. And then we've got a bit of reverb. You can hear that. And we also have the saturator here. So what this is doing, you can see it's not on that much. If we turn it up too much, yeah, it kind of starts to get a little crazy. But what's happening here is I'm using this sinoid fold, and it gives you this nice kind of like sine shaper, like crunchy saturator feel. And I think this is really good, especially like in the break, because when I don't have this, it's just a bit flat. But if you add this, the way that this effect interacts with the reverb is kind of like creating this nice moving texture on the sound, and it really brings it to life. So yeah, it's a little detail that can really help take it to the next level. I have my ultimate stereo widening rack, which there's a video about that on my channel. That's just adding a bit of depth there. I've got this auto pin. It's actually the same one as I just showed you on the bass. I got a high pass filter, and then we have this wash here, which is really just like it's just a reverb with a high pass filter, and then this is like controlling the dry wet and the decay. Then we have this arp. So, I'll show you the MIDI for this. What it's doing is it's a pretty simple F minor thing. We're just using 3 notes, F, C, and C sharp. The root note, the 5th, and the 6th. So we're going like... And that's another call and response too, right? Because we have dun-dun-dun-dun. That's the call. And then dun-dun-dun-dun. That's the response. So the sound for this one is made with operator. It's actually just a saw wave. And then we have a low pass filter with an envelope. And then I have this LFO on the pitch. And it's moving really, really fast. So it gives you this like... Here's without it. You can hear it's like just very flat. And then with it. It gives you like this buzziness to it. And it also has a very like trancey kind of feel too. So it's nice. I've got a bit of chorus on that. A bit of echo, which is kind of spreading it out. You can see a bit of reverb. I have a similar saturator to the one I showed you on that lead actually, so same deal. It's going after the reverb and adding kind of like a nice moving texture to this. We got a high pass filter. We have an auto pan, which is again just side chaining this to, or making it sound side chain to the cake. And then we have a low pass filter just bringing it in and out. The next thing we have here, and the last synth we have, is the pad. So what's happening with this pad is it's kind of playing its own chord progression. It's not really a chord progression. It's almost like a chord melody. It's like I'm just taking all these different notes in the scale, and I have these different little melodies happening that kind of stack together. So you can see, like, to start with, there's just a low F and a high F, right? But then we have C, right? Like that little melody happening going from C to A sharp. And then back and back. But then there's also that melody. But then there's also like all this is going on. And then it creates this nice like musical thing happening. And then when you stack that with the bass and all the other stuff, it really helps tell the story. And it's also just very like emotional, and I think it works well in this part of the track too, because you've had this big drop and this big break with the lead, and now we need something a little bit more atmospheric that's kind of like just more chill, but also still like keeping the energy, and this is perfect for that. So what's happening here is it's wavetable. It's a square wave. We have just actually an LFO on the volume. So that's how you're getting that like da-da-da-da kind of thing. Bit of reverb. Again, the stereo widening rack that I talked about earlier. I've got a low pass filter which just brings it in and out. You can see with all the synths, there's constantly like a filter or something automating. It's never just like in the same place for a long period of time. And then we also have this auto pan to make it sound sidechained to the kick. Cool, so that is all the synths. Now we have these two little things I'll show you, which is for this transition here. So you can see this is basically what's happening is it's like this transition in the break with a Rave loop. This is one of mine. It's from my Ultimate Rave Loops pack, which you can find on my website at the top of the description. And what's happening is so it just plays here in the break, and it's kind of like building up, right? We have like a low pass, then we have the washout again, and then there's this little snare here. And the snare just does 16th notes, and then I'm using the volume on the simpler actually. to make that build up. I also have one over there. So it's a simple little build up, because you don't want to have too much effects and like, big sweep and all this kind of stuff happening. So this is a really nice way to kind of do it in a classy way. Then we have the percussion. So you can hear there's a lot of groove going on in here. And that's what this is meant to be, because really, like, essentially the way this is going to work is you kind of have like your main drums, right? Like all of these, which are going to be pretty straightforward and clean. And then this is really where the groove is happening. And the way we're creating that groove is it's three things. So it's this. Again, another one of my Rave loops. Got a little bit of automation on this too in the outro. So that's kind of like in the mid-range. We have this one, which is another one of mine, which is adding like some, kind of like mid-range, high-end with like some hi-hats. And then we have this little effects loop that I made, where it's basically just some of my effects samples going through a bit of distortion, and then it has this auto pan. And what's happening is it's like a very rhythmic 8th note pattern, but then there's also the auto pan happening. So you can hear it's like that groove of the rhythm that's happening actually on the arrangement here, and then also this auto pan working with it. And then we just have a low pass filter, which moves up and down throughout the track. And yeah, and then on the group of all that, we just have a low pass to kind of make it disappear at some parts. Then we have the main hi-hat. So one layer, which is like an open hi-hat. One which is a nice punchy hi-hat, and it comes together. You can see here, this one has a nice high end to it, which sits really well on top of that other one. We have this guy. So this is the snare. It's made with two layers. So we have a Lindrum clap and this snare. You can see they're both low passed a little bit too to make it a little bit darker going into the distortion. That's a good technique. Then we have a very short, a little bit of reverb. High pass to get rid of some of the lows to give the distortion a little bit more headroom. We have some overdrive and saturation, and then another high pass filter. And then the last drum we have down here is just a ride. Just a nice 909 classic techno ride, a bit of a high pass filter. And yeah, other than that, we really just have a bunch of effects down here. So it's just a bunch of different samples. Some of these have reverb, delay, all that different stuff. Put kind of like strategically through the track. I think what I really want to show you guys here is not even just like, oh, here's the effect samples. These are all just from my sample packs, which again, link is at the top of the description. But what we're doing here is it's like kind of keeping the arrangement moving without being too much. Because obviously, like, okay, if you're making like maybe a more main room techno track or like house or something like that, you want to have something every like 8-16 bars, like pretty frequently to keep the track moving, right? But here it's not so simple, because if you start to do that, it doesn't really have that same kind of raw, like ravey warehouse sort of feel to it anymore. It starts to get a little bit too EDM, I think. And so what you got to do is use effects, because if you have no effects, it's going to get kind of boring and it's going to feel too repetitive. But use them strategically so it's not too much. So like over here in the intro, you can see there's actually a lot of effects because there's no other instruments there, right? The key is like once the synths come in and you have the arrangement of the track moving, that's when you need less and less of these. Like over here in the drop, it's where we have the least amount of them. But then the intro, obviously, we have a bunch because, yeah, you want to have something moving there. The other thing is, like, this can kind of make your intro more interesting. I think if you only have just your drums in the intro, it's, like, kind of boring for streaming, right? And you got to think about that now because it's just as important as the DJ in 2021. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can grab this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, the entire template, the full arrangement. It's all available at the top of the description on my website. Definitely go grab that. It really helps support me. I don't make a whole lot off of YouTube. If I've helped you guys with any videos, go grab this and it'll keep me going so I keep bringing you guys more videos that'll show you things that are not out there on the internet already. It also will really help support you, take your tracks to the next level. You know, I promise you, this is something you could do right now that would take your tracks infinitely higher in literally just right now. Just having this template, I promise you, it'll help you so much. That's the goal of this, is not to just create some product to just sell to you guys. I do am benefiting a little bit from that, but the truth is, like, I'm trying to create the next generation of useful products and things that can actually, like, take your tracks to the next level and aren't just, like, you know, a bunch of buzzwords and stuff, but really a high quality template right now that's going to sound on the same quality level as the tracks that you love. So go grab that. Links at the top of the description. It's going to take your tracks to the next level. Thank you so much for the support, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.